his mom. Oh, I'm not on this. What's your name? I'm sorry, Pam. Pam Hannigan. They're in Mark's ward. They're visiting us today.
I'm visiting.
John Boy.
I'm visiting.
Oh.
Josh, don't. There's not enough light.
Mom, make all right,
are you all listening?
Watch Grandpa.
Now, this story has to be German.
No.
You understand German accent?
Translate it.
You listen very carefully.
She'll understand if she watches. Just watch him. It's funny anyways, Lane.
Okay.
Just listen very carefully.
Okay.
This story takes place in Germany, in the old country. The story is about a family, and they have a funny last name. The last name is Crooked Mouse. Family with the last name Mr. Crooked Mouse and Mrs. Crooked Mouse and their children. Well, this man was a traveling salesman. What a traveling salesman is. What's a traveling salesman? Who knows what is a traveling salesman?
I think he crosses the sea. He travels and he sells stuff.
That's right. Wow. That's very, very good. The traveling salesman, he gets lost. He has no place to stay, and it's very late in the nighttime. He comes, he knocks on the door, and the family opens the door, they let him come in. It's a strange family. They all got funny-looking mouths. Mouths are kind of crooked looking. But they give him something good to eat. He has something to eat. They sit around the table, they talk a little bit. Finally, it gets late at night, and they're going to go to bed. And they didn't have any electric lights. They don't have no electric lights. All they have is a candle. The candle's burning away, and they're going to turn out the lights. They're going to blow out the candle. Now, the father, he takes the candle in his hand, and he says, "All children, time to go to bed. We're going to go to sleep now, and I'm going to blow out the candle."
I know what that means.
So the father, he's talking kind of funny. When you look really carefully the way the father's talking, he's talking like this. He said, "Now it's time for you all to go to bed. I want you all to go to bed, and I'm going to blow out the candle." And he said, "For some reason I can't blow out this candle." And the mother, she says, "Well, give me the candle. I blow out the candle for you." He takes the candle and she goes,
I can blow it out.
"For some reason I can't blow out this candle." Well, the oldest son, he comes down the stairs and he says, "What's the matter here anyway? Can't you blow out that candle? Give me the candle, I blow it out." And he couldn't blow out the candle either. Well, the little girl, she comes into the living room. She looked around her. "What's the matter here? Nobody brought this candle? Give me the candle. I blow out the candle for you." And she couldn't blow out the candle either. Well, the traveling salesman, he's looking at this whole thing. And he said, "I think maybe I blow out the candle for you." He said, "You can blow out the candle for us so we can go to bed." He said, "Yes, I blow out the candle for you." They give the traveling salesman the candle, and he looked at the candle and he says, "Okay." And the candle's out.
And children, never try this at home.
He's all get gone. He's all get gone.
Right.
Grandpa's magic.
I just did it.
You never should do it because only
Yeah,
Grandpa
because
can
he's
do
got
it.
one on his hand. He has one
But
on.
now I want to tell you a real story.
Yeah. A funny one.
This is just for the children. Parents can listen if they want, but it's just for the kids.
No. You did right.
You have to
I
remember,
got a funny one.
this is about a little boy by the name of Johnny and a little girl by the name of, what's her name again? Sylvia. Johnny and Sylvia.
Johnny.
Are you listening very carefully now?
Shalane,
Listen very carefully.
don't ask questions. Listen.
Johnny and Sylvia lived in Germany. And they lived just outside of the great big forest. It was called the Black Forest. Now, sometimes people think that the Black Forest is haunted or it's enchanted. They think that sometimes there are evil spirits in the Black Forest. Now, some people know, of course, that there aren't any evil things in the Black Forest. But some of the parents are very superstitious and they won't let their children go in the Black Forest at all. Well, on this particular night, and it's Christmas time. It's Christmas time. Johnny and Sylvia, they were really, really good friends. They liked each other, and they went to school together, and they just really liked each other a lot. Johnny was just a little bit older than Sylvia. And they had on their galoshes. You know what galoshes are? Want to know what galoshes are? You know what galoshes are? They're like boots. They're great, big, thick rubber boots. They had on their boots, they had on their mittens, their gloves, scarves wrapped around their necks, and they had heavy, heavy caps on their heads. They wanted to go for a walk.
Do you want some?
And they asked both their mother and their father if they could go for a walk. Johnny's mother and father said that they could go on a walk if they didn't go into the Black Forest. Now, whatever you do, don't go into the Black Forest. Johnny said, we promise we won't go in the Black Forest. We promise we won't do that. And so they asked Linda's mother and father if she could go in for a walk. She said, you can go for a walk, but you may not go in the Black Forest. Whatever you do not go in the Black Forest. And we promise we won't go in the Black Forest. So, with their mittens and their gloves, their gloves and their galoshes, their scarves, and their heavy coats, they went out for a walk and they trudged through the snow. And before long, they got to the very edge of the Black Forest. Johnny turned to Linda to Sylvia and said, "Have you ever been in the Black Forest?" And she said, "I've never been in the Black Forest before." And he said, "Are you scared of the Black Forest? Would you be scared to go in there tonight?" And she said, "Well," she said, "I think if I were with you, since you're so big and strong, I wouldn't be afraid to go in the Black Forest, but we told Mother and Father that we wouldn't go in the Black Forest." Johnny thought for a moment and he said, "Well, but we wouldn't have to tell them. If we didn't tell them that we went, they would never know, and we wouldn't go very far. But I've always wanted to go in to see what it's like in the forest." And she said, "I'm not afraid to go." And she said, "We'll only go for a little bit," he said. "We'll just go for a little bit, and then we'll hurry right back home." So they went into the Black Forest. And before long, they hadn't taken very many steps, and they looked around behind them, and they couldn't see the opening of the forest anymore. It was like the forest had closed in behind them. And it was strange, because even though it was very, very, very cold, and they had their gloves and their scarf and their galoshes, there was no snow on the ground. It was so strange. There was no snow on the ground, and they could see the stars. It was just like springtime. It was so warm. And they could hear the pine needles crunching under their feet. It wasn't snow. It was like pine needles crunching under their feet as they walked. And they got so warm that they took off their gloves. And they took off their hat. It was so warm. And they said, "Well, this is not wintertime. This is so beautiful." And they could hear birds singing. And they said, "Who would ever be afraid to come in the Black Forest? It's such a beautiful place." And there's a cuckoo bird. You know what a cuckoo bird is?
Yeah.
What's a cuckoo bird?
It's sometimes in clocks, so when it's at 12 o'clock, it comes and goes cuckoo.
Right. In the Black Forest, you have cuckoo birds. And some people think that cuckoo birds are enchanted. Some people think that cuckoo birds can talk. There was a cuckoo bird up on the branch of the tree, and it was a little tiny bird. Kept poking its head out, and it would say, "Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo." And they listened to that bird, and they walked a little bit further, and all of a sudden, there was that same bird. "Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo." And he said, "This bird must be following us." And then all of a sudden, they came to a clearing. There was no trees. It was just almost like almost as big a space as this whole house. And there weren't any trees there except for one tree in the very, very center. In the very center of the clearing, it was the tallest tree they had ever seen. And as they looked, it was a Christmas tree. And it was white, only there was no snow on it. And they could see that there were ornaments hanging out. They were great, big ornaments. I mean, they were like this. And they looked at the ornaments, And they could tell that they were not made of glass, they were not made of wood, and they had arms and legs and heads, and they looked like little boys and little girls hanging from the branches of the tree. They looked, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 50, 25, 35 little boys and girls hanging from the branches of this tree. And some of them were like this, like they were in this kind of a position. And some were like this. And some were going like this, and you could tell by looking at them that they didn't move. But they looked like they were very frightened, every one of them. They didn't move, but they looked at them. They didn't move their fingers, they didn't move their toes. One of the ornaments that was hanging from the tree was a little boy. And he was about the size of Josh. And he was hanging on the bottom branch of the tree, and he was going like this. And they came over to him and they touched him. And even though he had clothes on, and shirt, and pants, his body was just as stiff as if it had been made out of glass. And they could turn him just like this. He couldn't move, he couldn't talk, but it was a little boy. Looked just like a real little boy. Now, they began to get a funny feeling. And Sylvia said, I want to go home. And Johnny said, I think we should go home too. And so they turned around and they began to run. And they ran as fast as they could, and as they ran, they would cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. And they didn't know whether to go to this direction or to that direction. They thought they were going in the same direction that they had come in. And everywhere they went, they heard cuckoo, cuckoo, and all of a sudden they came into a clearing. And there was another great big tree, just like the one they had seen. These little boys and girls hanging from the trees. And then they realized that it was the same tree, that there was an enchantment, it was magic or something. No matter where they went, they couldn't get away from that tree. They would come back to that tree. And then they started getting really, really frightened. What are we going to do? She said. Johnny said, I don't know what we're going to do. And then all of a sudden, they heard a noise. And as they turned and looked, they could see in the distance a little house. Beyond the tree, all kinds of branches were covering the house. They could see little windows. There was a light burning in the window. They heard a noise. I said, what is that? And Johnny said, let's go see. And she said, oh, I'm afraid to go see. I don't want to go see. And he said, well, maybe they can help us. Maybe they can tell us the way out. Maybe it's a woodcutter or something like that lives there. So she said, well, but I'm really afraid. And he said, well, don't be afraid. I'll take care. I won't let anything happen to you. So they walked away from the tree over towards the house. And they got to the house. And they looked into the house and they saw a woman. And she was very, very beautiful. Very beautiful. Very young and very pretty. And they could see in the house that there was a kitchen. And she was standing in the kitchen. And there was a great big stove. Only it was like a stove you've never seen before. It was so big, and it wasn't just that where you cook things on top, but if you opened it up, it was big enough that you could walk right into that oven. It was a great big oven. Well, they were looking through the window, and then all of a sudden, this woman looked up out the window and she said, hello, children. I'll bet you're hungry. Why don't you come in and I'll fix you something to eat? And Johnny said, it's all right. It's all right. She will be good to us. She will help us get out of here. But she's so nice looking. So they went in the house. They went in the house and she brought them right over. She said, come children and sit down and I'll get you something. Would you like some cookies and milk? Oh yes, they were so hungry. She got some cookies and some milk and they said, who are you? And she said, my name is Glendora. And she said, and I live here, and this is my tree out there that you were looking at. Well, that is a strange tree because there's boys and girls hanging on that. Oh, she said, those are just ornaments. I make those ornaments. She said, I make them to look just like boys and girls. They look awfully real. She said, well, I know how to do it. I'm very good. In fact, I'll show you how I do it if you're interested. So they said, well, what we really would like to do is get home because we're very scared. We promised our mother and father that we wouldn't come into the Black Forest, and now we've disobeyed, and now we're really worried as to what's going to happen. She said, well, I can understand that, and if you would like, I will take you. I will take you to the edge of the forest so that you, oh, that would be wonderful, they said. But first of all, she said, you must drink your milk and eat the cookies. And then she said, wouldn't you like to see how I make my ornaments while you're eating your cookies and drinking your milk? I said, yes, we would like to see that. She said, walk over to this great big oven. She said, this is how I do it. And she turned on the oven, and there was a kind of a fire that went all around the oven like this. She says, I bake them in there. And they turn into beautiful, beautiful ornaments that I hang on my tree. And by this time they were through eating their cookies and drinking their milk. And Johnny said, now it's time for us to go. And she said, wouldn't you like to see something more about how I make my ornaments? No, we think we would like to go. And you promised us that you would take us to the edge. She said, I will. She said, let me get my cap, and my gloves, and I will take you to the edge of the forest. And she said, but she said, while I'm gone, getting my hat and my gloves, she said, don't go close to the oven. Whatever you do, don't go close to the oven. You stay away from the oven. The oven is kind of dangerous. And so she was gone to get her hat and her coat and her gloves. And Johnny said, I have to look at the oven. And she said, why? She said, I don't know. I just have to look at it. I just want to look at it. I want to go over there and look at it. And she said, oh, don't do it. She said, I just have a bad feeling. She said, I can't help myself. I just have to look at it. And he got up, and she said, I think we should go. I think we should run right now. And he said, but I have to look at the oven. And he kept taking a step, and a step, and a step towards the oven. And she said, I think we should go right now. And he said, I can't. What do you mean you can't? He says, I have to look at the oven. She said, I mean you can't? He says, I can't stop walking. My feet are just taking me there. And all of a sudden, we started to walk into the oven where the fire was going. And she was just horrified. And all of a sudden, they heard this laugh, this horrible laugh that came out of the other room. It was Glendora. And she turned around and she saw, instead of this beautiful woman, she saw Glendora coming out, and she was dressed in black. All in black. And she said, well, children, this is the house of Glendora the witch. And by this time, Johnny walked into the oven. And the oven automatically just went closed. It closed him right in the oven. Well, little Sylvia just ran as fast as she could run. Just as fast as her legs would take her, she ran out, and even though she left her scarf and her gloves there, she just ran as fast as her legs would take her. When she got outside, she could hear this, and finally, she knew that she couldn't get away from that tree, and she knew that she would see little Johnny hanging on that tree the next morning, just like one of those other ornaments. And finally, she just threw herself down on the ground. She started to cry. And she heard, cuckoo, cuckoo. And she looked up, and there was that little bird. She said, little bird, can you talk? Are you an enchanted bird? The little bird said, yes, I can talk. I can talk to you. She's then help me, what can I do? I am so frightened. The little bird said, I will tell you what you can do. If you're willing to do what I tell you to do, and you can save Johnny. She said, what do I have to do? He said, if you will believe me, you go back and you tell Glendora the witch that she can have you instead of Johnny, and make you into an ornament instead of Johnny. If you're willing to do that, then Johnny will be free. And she said, well, then I would have to give my life to do that. And she said, the little bird said, that's right. That's the enchantment. And the little bird said, I've talked to many little children that none of them will ever do it. They're always frightened. They're always frightened to do that. She thought for a minute, she said, I just couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that. The more she looked at those little ornaments hanging on that tree, the more she thought of poor Johnny. She said, I'm not going to get out of here anyway. And she said, how will I ever be able to explain to Johnny's mother and daddy even if I do get out of here? So she turned around and she swallowed hard and the tears started to come down her cheeks and she felt so bad. She went back and she knocked on Glendora's door. And the door creaked open and there stood the wicked witch, all dressed in black. And the witch said, what is it, little girl? What would you like? She said, I want to be made into a Christmas tree ornament so that Johnny can go free. And all of a sudden, the witch began to scream. And she screamed almost like she was in pain. Oh, she said, oh, no, no, no. And she said, yes, take me so that Johnny can go free. And she began to throw her arms. All of a sudden, the wicked witch began to get smaller, smaller, and smaller, and smaller, until she was like a little Christmas tree ornament on the floor. Just little tiny. And she stopped moving. And she was just like she was made out of glass. The next thing she heard a little boy crying. And she opened the oven, and the fire was gone out. And there was little Johnny laying in the oven, crying, crying, crying. She helped him out and put his arms around him, and he said, it was horrible. It was horrible. I can't even remember what happened, but it was horrible. I just know it was horrible. And then they heard other sounds. And they looked out the window, and all the children on the tree were moving. And they had come back alive. And they began to jump down from the tree, and some of them helped the others, and all the children came alive again. And there were children everywhere, and they were so happy. And they said, now we can go home to our mothers and our fathers. And they said, but we don't know how to get out of here. And then they heard, cuckoo, cuckoo. They looked at the little bird and said, can you help us get out of here? And the bird said, since the spell has been broken, and the wicked witch has been put to death, now I'm free. I don't have to live in this black forest any longer. And I will then take you to the clearing. And so they went to the clearing, the edge of the forest, and when they got there, the little bird flew off into the sky, and they went, now it was very cold, they were outside of the forest, and that night there were people all over the countryside who got to see little boys and little girls they had not seen for years and years, that had come back alive. And when they got home to their parents, little Sylvie and Johnny, they didn't dare tell them everything that had happened. They knew their parents would not believe it. Is, where have you been? Where have you been? And they said, well, we just lost our way, and it was hard for us to find our way, and we're just grateful that we got home. And as little Sylvia came into our house, her mother said, well, what is that you have in your pocket? And she pulled out of her pocket a little Christmas tree ornament. She said, this is a Christmas tree ornament of the wicked witch by the name of Glendora that I thought we could hang on our Christmas tree. To remember that with love, you can overcome all bad things, even the spell of wicked witches. And so for every year after that, I used to hang that ornament on that Christmas tree as a reminder. And that's the
Is that
story.
story true?
Well, of course.
Good.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. There can never be a conspiracy with people on it. I do not believe it.
That's about a witch. Yes. It's about a witch.
Witches are not real. Witches are not real. I do not believe it. Me neither. Don't even ask me like
Now listen, one other thing, kids. We have got some videos. Moms and daddies are going to do a radio program, and we need to have it really quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are again for our annual broadcast of Crime Stoppers. A look at the most dastardly deeds by some of the worst criminals of all time. Tonight we're going to take a look at a situation involving the horrible deeds of Eric the Elf, a trusted employee of Santa Claus at the North Pole. This is your investigator, Sam Spade. I have personally investigated this case and am going to share with you the investigation as it proceeds. Each of these witnesses will be testifying this evening, telling the truth as they know it to be, as we unravel this most dastardly deed of Eric the Elf. And now, without further ado, we'd like to proceed with our investigation this evening into dastardly crime. And first of all, we'd like to bring Mrs. Claus, none other than the wife of the famous Santa Claus himself. How are you, Mrs. Claus, this evening?
I'm a little distraught, but other than that, I'm okay.
And what is it that's troubling you this evening?
Well, Santa and I have lived up on the North Pole for forever, and the elves are...
Just how old are you, Mrs. Claus?
Oh, I forget. I'm old enough to be the elves. I'm old enough to be Mrs. Claus.
All right. Very, very old.
You know, all of those elves are kind of like children to me.
Now, are the elves employed, or are they, how do you get them to do this work for you year-round, working in the workshop?
Well, it's a job for them. They take a test.
A test? What kind of a test?
Santa is very particular about his elves. He needs those elves to be on task. He needs them to do good work. I mean, we're sending toys all around the world. We need them to be good.
So this is kind of a performance test,
Oh.
dexterity, and that sort of thing, their ability to actually work and produce at high levels of output.
Yes, and also their integrity.
So what kind, you have an elf that is lacking in integrity. Did he pass the test?
He passed it with flying colors, and I don't know how.
You suspect there may have been some duplicity here.
I think so.
Mm-hmm. Which you would hardly expect among elves.
Never,
Yes,
never.
right.
Especially after that test. I mean, it's a hard one. It's hard. I helped Santa come up with it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
What is the name of the elf that is causing you to be so distraught?
Commercial. We need to have a commercial while we find another tape.
What's the matter?
The tapes run out. Is there any of these? that
Oh,
you
this
can
right
use?
here?
Yes.
No, can you stop that tape? And we'll come
I'll
back
do
to
the
it?
commercial. If you have calls. It needs to be used. Okay.
Excuse me while we go to a commercial break.
Did I give them to you that I bought?
I have no idea where they are.
The name of the elf? Kind of like a son to me. His name's Eric. Eric the elf.
Eric. Sounds Scandinavian.
Yeah,
One of those elves from Denmark, I assume.
I believe so.
Okay. Well, now, exactly what is it that Eric has done that is so upsetting to you?
Well, he's almost like a son to me, and that's why it hurts so bad. I noticed a while back that some of Santa's toys have been diminishing, and
You mean the stockpile of toys?
yeah, and Christmas was coming, and they usually are piling up, you know.
Well, we're talking about a lot of toys.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, big
All
buck,
over the world.
big buck
Oh,
items here.
Oh, yes. We're talking.
Like erector sets,
Oh,
like video games.
We're talking
like,
Sega. We're talking, you know, Sony PlayStation. We're talking Power Rangers. We're talking.
We are talking big bucks. That's right.
Kitchens for little girls. American dolls. Everything.
And you're talking about these are just disappearing then.
Yeah,
And you think Eric has had something to do with this?
Well,
What would an elf want with those toys?
I couldn't think. I didn't know why an elf would want this, and I thought we could trust all of our elves, and so I decided to get a private investigator, and he found out that our Eric has been selling these toys.
Selling the toys?
Yeah.
Santa Claus is selling Santa Claus's toys?
Mhm.
Oh my, we have uncovered a horrible thing here.
Yeah. And, gets worse than that.
Go ahead.
I guess he's selling them to this guy named Larry, and he's selling them on the black market. Santa's toys on the black market. I want to see Eric behind bars. At first, I don't know, I was thinking about cutting back on the cookies.
This seems
But-
strange to you that a woman of such charitable disposition, who is loving of children all over the world, that you are so fixed on this business of putting this elf behind bars. This hardly seems in character for you.
Does it work? We need to pay for something, right? Can we go over to? Oh, yeah, get some hymnals, Mom. There's hymnals over there.
We're doing a game of Newlywed Game. Christmas Eve.
Hey, these are Mom's pins. Oh, there.
See who's here.
Ow!
There's Jeff. Rebecca. Oh, Jeff.
Like, how old were they? No. We're 9.
Carrie, Chrissy.
Hey!
Say hi. Oh, there's Soleil. Soleil's on the camera. Soleil, what? I know I did. It was great.
And I want to see it.
It's at home.
I'm hard of hearing. Can you talk a little louder?